Hey there, Agile Adventurer. Just a quick question. What if, for the price of a fancy coffee or half a pizza, you could unlock over 700 hours of the best Agile content on the planet? That's audio, video, e-courses, books, presentations, all that you can think of. But you can also join live calls with world-class practitioners and hang out in a flame war-free and AI slop-clean Slack with the sharpest minds in the game. Oh, and yes, you get direct access to me, Vasco, your Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. No, this is not a drill. It's the Scrum Master Toolbox membership. And it's your unfair advantage in the Agile world. So if you want to know more, go check out scrummastertoolbox.org/membership. That's scrummastertoolbox.org/membership. And check out all the goodies we have for you. Do it now. But if you're not doing it now, let's listen to the podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday. This week we have with us Stuart Tipples. Hey, Stuart. Welcome back.
Hey, Vasco. Thank you.
So Tuesday is Team Tuesday here on the podcast, and we'll talk about teams in a second. But before we go there, if you think about a book that inspired you in your career as a Scrum Master, what would that be?
Yeah, so this one comes a bit left field when I suggest it to people, and this is a great book for Scrum Masters. It's a great book for anyone really interested in servant leadership and the idea of how you lead with the team rather than lead in front of the team. And it's a book called Trust-Based Leadership. It's by a guy called Mike, probably going to terribly mispronounce the surname, but it's Ettore or Ettore. What I found really interesting and really connected with me with this book is this isn't your sort of standard corporate how to be a sort of a team leader, right? It really, it's devoid of that sort of corporate fluff, shall we say, right? And the reason being is Mike is a former Marine turned executive. And what I love about his approach in this book and his message in this book is that it is super duper clear what the message is. And it's, you don't build trust by managing. If you don't build trust, you're just managing compliance, is the direct quote from the book. You're not inspiring commitment. He spends a lot of time in this book drawing on how trust and trust-based leadership is in place in the Marine Corps. And, by no means is he making any claims that sort of, the Marines invented sort of servant leadership, but they kind of have it there as a principle. And it's super, super, super interesting. And I really just thought it as a piece of reading and as a sort of a refreshing break from your sort of normal sort of corporate how to be a great leader book. This one is, it's like a drill sergeant out of a Stanley Kubrick book, sort of yelling you into awareness, right? It's that sort of refreshing. His message ultimately boils down to, it's about how you lead with consistency, how you lead with clarity, coming back to what we spoke to previously about how you lead with courage. And ultimately not waiting for permission to do so. And that was sort of a couple of the key elements that sort of stuck with me was don't wait for permission. So sort of that invitation to sort of go and do it. It's an old favorite expression of mine. I'd rather ask forgiveness than permission. It's great because I think it's consumable and it's a lesson that can be learned by anyone at any level of their career, whether they're in a leadership role currently, whether they have aspirations to be a leader, or whether they're part of a team, right? It's still that sort of, there's still value in that message. I think I'm going to boil it down as to why I think as a Scrum Master, you should read this book. I think your role as a Scrum Master, it's not just about protecting the team from that sort of wider outside corporate barrage, although that's a big part of what you do. But you are as a Scrum Master, you are responsible for building a space in your team where trust is almost your operating system, right? It's the currency by which that team succeeds. You have to trust each other, and you need to build perceived external trust of that team. And again, we come back to the idea of sort of, how do you build a team's credibility? And how do you build that sort of trust organizationally and individually with stakeholders? We all know that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Without psychological safety in our teams, teams essentially, they'll rot from the inside out, right? They're doomed. This book, as a Scrum Master, gives you an adrenaline shot into your mindset thinking. It gives you language that's really helpful, and it should bolster your courage to lead with your team and sort of not lead at them.
Okay,
so yeah, I really can't recommend it enough.
So talking about teams, of course, because that's the next topic we cover. Tell us the story of a team and how they, over time, kind of delved into maybe negative patterns. What were those patterns, and how did that affect the team? So tell us the story of that team that self-destructed, Stuart.
Yeah, so I've told this story quite a few times, and I tell it to sort of new teams I'm working with, to the point that I've given them the name, and I now lovingly refer to them as the Get Along Gang, which, if you're of a certain age in the UK, was a children's Saturday morning cartoon. But yeah, this was a team that I didn't start with. I was sort of brought in as a coach to support the Scrum Master and support the team, get out of a bit of a funk they were in. They were behind on work supporting a B2B customer portal that was linked to a much larger program of work, and it was a key piece. And again, on the face of it, with this team, things seemed okay, right? The Scrum Master was running the events, everything was happening. They had slipped their retrospectives, as we've talked about before. That happens. They sort of had that terrible view that they were just a drain. It was output focus rather than sort of focus on how they could help the team. Despite this, and despite the sort of pressures they were under to deliver, they all seemed quite happy. Everybody seemed to get along. Retros were just not silent, but there was no real there was nothing actionable coming out of it. It was kind of, it's all fine. It's all good. Yeah, we're happy. Yeah, we know we've got lots of work to do. We've just kind of got to get on with it. That attitude wasn't helped by the fact that I had a little bit of hero culture in that team, where we had a sort of one of the devs who was, a rock star, but they kind of felt like they were taking the lion's share of the work. It was a lot on their shoulders, and they'd kind of fallen into that trap of, as long as my work's done, it's okay. Like, I've done my bit. Which is really sort of bad for any team dynamic, right? It's bad to be over-reliant on any one single team member, but it's also bad that you're sort of just breaking away to like, well, my bit's done, it's you lot, you sucked, you, the other reason we didn't sort of achieve the goal. So my support initially was to just let's sort of reinforce the structure. Let's try and sort of break away from that hero culture. And I started to sort of encourage the Scrum Master to share the work out a bit more evenly amongst the devs. I even suggested we just try some simple sort of approaches, like a bit of sort of pair programming, so the other devs could work with the more experienced dev. That did not go down well at all. There was huge pushback. Ultimately, I think what really sort of shattered this team was, and my big sort of learning from it was, silence is not agreement, right? So as a Scrum Master, we need to sort of recognize that early on and push, use real sort of rudimentary, the 5 whys. If I'd applied that a lot earlier in that particular situation, I no doubt would have uncovered this.
So when you say silence affected this team, you mean like the team was not like taking ownership? They were not stepping up and owning the challenges that they were facing? Even though they were late, they were just kind of accepting it as just a given?
Yeah. I think it was sort of almost, what's the expression? It was almost toxic positivity. I think if I look back with this team, right, it was the sort of the unwillingness to sort of address the issues. It was the unwillingness, and I say unwillingness, that's probably not fair. They didn't feel safe or comfortable to disagree. So the psychological safety was missing, and I think that was really painful for me as a coach to realize, again, quite later on. As I said, if I'd maybe sort of hit them with the 5 whys and addressed the sort of the silence and that sort of very sort of muted.
What you're describing there is like, instead of engaging in conflict to resolve a problem, they would just sit back and wait for the problem to go away on its own, right?
Yeah. And you know what ultimately happened with this team, Vasco, is that, like in any situation, right, it exploded because it was left unattended. It wasn't addressed, and it sort of exploded into quite unpleasant, quite personal sort of disagreements. So by that point, it's very difficult to sort of apply beneficial sort of conflict management, because it's too late, right?
It's too late,
and emotions have sort of taken over. So I guess boiling it down, toxic positivity is real. Don't just accept that sort of if people tell you it's all good and it's fine, and you have a feeling in your gut as a Scrum Master, trust your intuition, push a little deeper, push with the team, push individually with one-on-ones, right? And understand, scratch below the surface. There's probably something that is giving you that feeling.
Yeah.
Because
and
the longer
actually,
you leave it, the bigger the fallout is, and the harder.
Yeah, and actually that's a very good point, right? Like, one of the patterns that we should always have in our minds is that when there isn't a conflict, it's because people are not taking the conflict that is latent there. I mean, and the conflict doesn't need to be disagreement. It could be just, positive tension, positive energy in the conversations. Maybe we could call it passion, right? Like,
exactly.
And when there isn't, we very often oscillate between silence and explosion. This is a very normal human pattern, right? Like, we hold off until it's too late, and then we have to get everything out of our chest. And of course, sometimes we lose kind of the guideposts of what is productive and respectful conflict, and we go too far. And if we do that, then it's too late. So it's a very important pattern to have in mind.
For anyone that's sort of experiencing this right now, I think my learning and how I ultimately sort of very slowly sort of repaired and rebuilt the trust in this team, I would say, is you can foster the psychological safety by normalizing healthy disagreement, right? Encourage it. Again, as a Scrum Master, you have to sort of bring that out, tease it out. You can have fun with it, right? You can be a bit sort of cheeky with it. We're very good as human beings at sort of reading each other, even in remote sort of, in the world where we live now, where we have sort of teams that are remotely, as long as even without cameras on, we can hear it in the voice, or we can hear it by the fact that people aren't engaging, right? There's something driving that. Trust your intuition. Scratch below the surface. But normalize that healthy disagreement, encourage it. A key one is, and I was guilty of this very early on in my career as a Scrum Master, in that I would sort of perhaps over-labor the idea of, of civility, and that we must all sort of be very civil, professional, and keep our emotions in check. But civility is kind of empty without honesty. So make sure that that you really are getting honest views, and you sort of work with your team. And every team's language will be different, right? Every team's idea of civility will be different. You'll have one team, whereas a group of people, they perhaps have enough trust to sort of be quite blunt, and in other teams, they need a bit more of a delicate approach.
Absolutely. Always keep civility, but of course, if there's no conflict, be aware of that. That's a sign.
100%.
Thank you very much for sharing that story, Stuart. All right, I hope you liked this episode. But before you hit next episode, here's the deal. This podcast is powered by people like you, the members who wanted more than just inspiration. They wanted real tools and real connection to people who are practicing Agile every day. We're talking access to over 700 hours of Agile Gold, CTO level strategy talks, summit keynotes, live workshops, e-courses, deep dive interviews, books, and if you're into no estimates, we got the pioneers of no estimates in those deep dive interviews as well. Agile business intelligence, creating product visions, coaching your product owner courses, you name it. You'll get invites to monthly live Q&As with Agile pioneers and practitioners, plus a private Slack community, which is free of all of that AI slop you see everywhere, and of course, without the flame wars. It's a community of practitioners that want to learn and thrive together. It's the best place to connect with community and learn together. So if this podcast has helped you before, imagine what you will get from this podcast membership. So head on over to scrummastertoolbox.org/membership and join the community that's shaping the future of Agile. And we have so much for you. So check out all the details at scrummastertoolbox.org/membership, because listening is great, it's important, but doing it together, that's next level. I'll see you in the community Slack. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.